rust, and our blood is actually more of a bluish color. Let's talk about how your heart actually beats. This is one of the unique characteristics of the cardiac muscle. So here's our heart, and we have the two pumps, the right pump and the right pump and the left pump. And you can see the left pump is represented in red because it's carrying the oxygenated blood, and the right pump is being represented in blue because it's carrying the deoxygenated blood. Now, there are actually, in each pump, there are 2 chambers. So your heart has a total of 4 chambers. How does the blood actually move from your body through those 4 chambers? Well, that's what the heartbeat does. So the structure that initiates each heartbeat is called the pacemaker, and it's located in the wall of the right atrium. So this is the pacemaker, what is known as the pacemaker. And what the pacemaker does is it sends out electrical impulses through both the right and left atrium simultaneously, causing them to contract and squeeze blood. So what happens in this heart down here, we have this pacemaker that is sending out electrical signals to both the right atrium and the left atrium. And when those electrical signals are sent out, it causes the right and the left atriums to squeeze, and any blood that is in those 2 chambers is then pushed down to the right ventricle or the left ventricle. So the pacemaker then sends impulses through the left and right ventricle simultaneously, causing them to contract and squeeze blood along its path. So as the blood is entering into the heart and it's entering into the left atrium, it is then squeezed out of the left atrium into the left ventricle because of these electrical signals that are being sent by the pacemaker. Same thing happens on the right side of the heart. Any blood that's in the right atrium is squeezed into the right ventricle because of these electrical signals. So the right atrium and the left atrium are being squeezed at the same time, just as the right ventricle and the left ventricle are being squeezed at the same time. So the 2 pumps of the heart are operating simultaneously, which is a really good thing for us, because what that does is it ensures that oxygen-rich blood travels through our body very, very quickly so that our bodies are never without necessary oxygen. Alright, and this blood that is being pumped through the heart and out of the heart and into our bodies is actually traveling through 3 types of blood vessels. It travels through arteries, which carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. Arteries are made of thick walls because they have to withstand high blood pressure. As that blood is being pumped out of the heart, it's being pumped out with a lot of force to ensure that it is able to travel through the body. Second type of blood vessel are the veins, which carry deoxygenated blood to the heart. So after the blood has traveled through the body, it loses all of its oxygen. That's the whole intent, is to take the oxygen that we breathe into our lungs, from the lungs, into the blood, and then disperse the blood through the body, and the body is absorbing the oxygen as the blood is traveling through. As the blood is distributing oxygen, it's also picking up carbon dioxide. And that deoxygenated blood that's high in carbon dioxide has to travel back to the heart so that the carbon dioxide can be diffused out of the blood into the lungs, and then you breathe it out. So the veins are made of thin, flexible walls to reduce blood resistance so the blood can get back to the heart as quickly as possible. Large veins actually contain valves to prevent backflow of the blood. For instance, the veins in your legs have valves that prevent the blood from traveling back down to your toes when it should actually be moving to your heart. And then finally you have capillaries, which play a very important role in the circulatory system. The capillaries are the site of gas and nutrient exchange. They are made of very thin walls that allow for easy diffusion. So how does oxygen get into the blood and carbon dioxide get out? Well, through the process of diffusion. Remember we talked about diffusion last semester? Well, this is diffusion in the circulatory system. And you can see it happening here because the red is the oxygenated and the blue is the deoxygenated. So these capillaries are allowing carbon dioxide to diffuse out of the blood and oxygen to diffuse into the blood in the lungs. So why does your body need 3 different types of blood vessels? Why can't we just have one type of blood vessel? Well, each blood vessel plays a very important but very different role. The arteries are large and they have thick walls to withstand the high pressure of blood being pumped out of the heart. Veins are thinner so that it doesn't restrict blood as it's traveling back to the heart. And the capillaries are what diffuse oxygen into the blood and carbon dioxide out of the blood. What is the function of the blood? The main function of the blood? The main function of the blood is to disperse oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body, because oxygen is a vital nutrient that we can't live without. Alright, let's talk more about the function of the blood. So what you're seeing in this image are healthy blood cells, and you can see in the middle they have a little dimple. That's the sign of a healthy blood cell. They transport nutrients, dissolved gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, enzymes, hormones, waste products, etc. So they are the body's main source of transportation. So our brains are constantly releasing hormones. When we're stressed, they release a hormone called cortisol. When we're sleepy, they release another type of hormone. How do these hormones get through our body? Well, through our blood. They also help us to maintain homeostasis through regulating our body temperature, our pH, and our electrolytes. We don't want our bodies to be too acid or too base. We want to remain relatively neutral, and the blood helps us to do that. Electrolytes are essential for brain function. They are typically include phosphorus and sodium. We need to maintain even levels of electrolytes in order for our body to function normally. So our blood helps us to maintain homeostasis, and it also protects against invaders. Remember, red blood cells are one type of blood, but another type of blood cell are the white blood cells, the macrophages, that help to defend against pathogens, and when we do get sick, they actually help us to get healthy again. And it's the blood that circulates those macrophages in order to be able to fight the pathogens effectively and quickly. And the blood also clots if we ever get an injury to prevent us from losing more blood, unless of course you suffer from hemophilia. So the blood is very, very vital. It performs a very important function in our bodies. So what is blood made out of? Well, 45% of our blood is made of living cells, and those living cells are the white blood cells that are part of our immune system, red blood cells that carry oxygen to our body and carry carbon dioxide back to our lungs, and then also platelets, which are cell fragments that contribute to clotting when we get an injury. 55% of our blood is plasma, which is simply water, dissolved fats, sugars, salts, and proteins. So it is actually possible to separate the living cells from the plasma. A person who donates blood, their blood can be put into what is called a centrifuge, and when that centrifuge spins, anything that's heavier sinks to the bottom. Again, if you remember from the first semester, that's called differentiation. So the plasma tends to float on top. So sometimes with a blood transfusion, a person only needs plasma instead of whole blood, and this is why plasma is sometimes separated from blood. And this is an image of healthy blood cells. And again, you can see this dimple in the middle. That's a sign that the blood cell has a lot of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is what is vital for transportation of oxygen. It's what allows the oxygen to bind to the cell. Okay, so here again is the heart, and you're seeing all the different parts. You can practice these different parts by organizing the following structures as they flow through the heart, starting with the right atrium. But let's take a look.
How the blood flows in the heart. Beating on average 70 times per minute, each day the heart beats about 100,000 times. In the course of a 70-year lifetime, it will beat more than 2.5 billion times without ever pausing to rest. The cycle of blood flow is as follows. The right atrium receives blood from the great veins, the superior and inferior vena cava. Blood passes from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood is pumped through the pulmonary valve and pulmonary arteries to the lungs. In the lungs, carbon dioxide is removed from the blood and oxygen is picked up. Through the pulmonary veins, oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium. From the left atrium, blood passes through the mitral valve to the left ventricle. As the left ventricle contracts, the pressure closes the mitral valve. The aortic valve opens, allowing blood to leave the heart via the main blood vessel called the aorta. When this cycle of pumping is complete, the aortic valve closes to prevent blood from dropping back into the heart. The heart is two separate pumps that work together. Oxygenated and nutrient-rich blood is pumped around the body. Deoxygenated blood, which contains waste products, is returned to the lungs to allow the entire cycle to begin again.
Okay, so that's a brief summary of how the heart functions, and also a brief summary of how the circulatory system functions, the main parts of the circulatory system, and why it's so vital for our body.